My beloved child, stay with me, because what happened this afternoon was not a small misunderstanding, an ordinary meeting, or another moment your soulmate can quietly hide behind. Something shifted the instant they heard your name spoken in a place where nobody was supposed to know it. Don't skip. Your soulmate needs to explain everything, but before they can stand before you and find the right words, you must understand how this afternoon began. At exactly 12:47, while they were trying to focus on a normal day, a message appeared on their phone from a number they had not seen in years. It contained no greeting and no explanation, only one sentence. Come to the old garden room at 3 o'clock, and bring the memory you have been carrying. Your soulmate read it twice. They almost ignored it, yet something about the phrase, the memory you have been carrying, made their hands grow still. There was only one memory that fit those words, a small handwritten card they had received long before you officially entered their life. The card was faded at the corners because they had opened it whenever loneliness convinced them that nobody would ever understand the hidden parts of their heart. On it were words that had stayed with them through disappointment, uncertainty, and every season in which they questioned their worth. The right person will recognize your heart before you learn how to explain it. Your soulmate never knew who wrote that message. It had been handed to them anonymously at a community gathering many years ago, and though they told themselves it was only a kind sentence from a stranger, they could never throw it away. This afternoon, someone somehow knew about it. Don't look away now. The mystery was already connected to you, although your soulmate did not yet understand how deeply. At 2:58, they reached the garden room behind an old bookshop at the quiet end of town. Sunlight passed through colored glass above the doorway, scattering gold and blue patterns across the floor like pieces of a forgotten sky. A small brass bell rang as they stepped inside, but nobody approached them. There were no customers, no voices, and no music. Only the slow movement of an antique clock and a table prepared for two people beside a tall window. On that table rested a sealed cream-colored envelope, a silver key, a pressed white flower, and an old photograph placed face down. Across the room stood a woman with calm eyes and silver hair. Your soulmate recognized her as Evelyn, a close friend of their grandmother and the former organizer of the gathering where the anonymous card had been given to them. They had not spoken to Evelyn in years. "You came," she said softly. Your soulmate did not sit. They held the card tightly and asked the question already burning inside them, "How did you know I still had this?" Evelyn glanced toward the envelope but did not answer directly. Instead, she asked, "Do you remember what you wished for on the afternoon you received it?" Your soulmate did remember. They had stood beneath a tree covered with paper ribbons, each ribbon holding a private wish. They had closed their eyes and asked for one person who would not disappear when their guarded heart became difficult to understand. They had never told anyone about that wish. Hearing Evelyn refer to it made the entire room feel different. This is where the story begins, because the meeting was never about another romance, a hidden choice, or someone replacing you. If anyone saw your soulmate entering that room with Evelyn, or noticed them sitting across from someone and assumed the worst, that assumption missed the truth completely. They had been summoned there because a secret linking you to their past had finally surfaced. Evelyn pointed toward the chair and said, "Before you open anything, answer one question honestly. Is there someone in your life now whose presence feels strangely familiar, even when everything between you is complicated?" Your soulmate immediately thought of you. They tried to hide it, but their expression changed before they could speak. Evelyn noticed. She pushed the sealed envelope closer. Your soulmate's breath paused when they saw what had been written across the front. It was your name. Not a nickname, not an initial, not a vague description. Your name, written clearly beneath a small symbol shaped like a compass. What comes next changes everything. Your soulmate demanded to know who had written it, why it had been prepared, and how long Evelyn had possessed it. Evelyn answered with a sentence that unsettled every belief they had about how your paths first crossed. This envelope did not begin with your meeting. It began years before either of you understood who the other would become. For a moment, your soulmate could not move. Every conversation with you returned at once. The pauses that felt meaningful, the strange sense of recognition in your eyes, the way ordinary moments with you carried an emotional weight neither of you could fully explain. They remembered the first time you spoke from your heart and how your voice felt less like an introduction and more like something returning. They had resisted that feeling because it was too powerful. They had called it coincidence, chemistry, timing, or imagination, yet none of those words had ever felt complete. Now your name was waiting inside a room connected to an anonymous message that had comforted them years before they believed they knew you. Stay till the end, because the envelope was only the first revelation. Evelyn turned the antique clock on the table so its face pointed toward your soulmate. The hands had stopped at 3:17. She explained that 3:17 was the exact time recorded on the back of the old photograph. It was also the time your soulmate had received the anonymous card. Then she asked them to turn the photograph over. They hesitated, sensing that the image would change something they could never return to pretending they did not know. When they finally lifted it, they saw a crowded courtyard beneath strings of white paper stars. A younger version of your soulmate stood near the wish tree, holding the card against their chest. Several people appeared in the background, some blurred by movement and sunlight. Evelyn tapped the far corner of the picture. There, partly hidden beside a table covered with blank cards, was someone leaning forward to write. The face was visible. The hands were visible. And although the photograph had been taken long ago, your soulmate recognized that expression immediately. It was you. Your answer is closer than you think. Your soulmate stared at your image until the room around them seemed to vanish. They looked from the photograph to your name on the envelope and then back to the card they had carried through years of their life. No, they whispered, not because they rejected what they saw, but because accepting it meant accepting that you had touched their story long before either of you understood it. Evelyn then revealed that boxes from the old gathering had recently been reopened while the bookshop archive was being organized. Registration pages, photographs, unfinished cards, and handwritten notes had been preserved. Among them was a writing sheet bearing the same words as the anonymous card. At the bottom of that original sheet was your signature. You had written several messages that afternoon for people you did not know, hoping a sentence of kindness might reach whoever needed it. One of those messages had reached your soulmate. You may not remember writing it. You may have believed it disappeared into a crowd and became part of an ordinary day. But your words found the one person whose heart would one day become entangled with yours. Something huge is waiting for you, because that discovery alone was not why your soulmate became overwhelmed. The real emotional twist arrived when Evelyn explained who had intentionally placed your card into their hands. It was their grandmother. She had seen you writing quietly at the table, had noticed the compassion in the way you chose every word, and had selected your card for the grandchild who had stopped believing anyone could recognize the tenderness hidden beneath their silence. Before handing it over, she had written the time on the photograph and placed a tiny compass symbol beside it. She later told Evelyn, "Some people meet twice. The first meeting plants a seed. The second meeting asks whether they are brave enough to notice what has grown." Your soulmate had never heard those words. Until this afternoon. Stay with me. Your soulmate sat down because their legs could no longer hold the weight of everything returning to them at once. They remembered how, on the day they received your card, their grandmother had watched them read it and asked, "Does it feel true?" Your soulmate had answered, "I want it to be." Their grandmother had smiled and said, "Then keep it until the person behind those words becomes clear." At the time, your soulmate assumed she was speaking poetically. They never imagined she had preserved a photograph, your original writing sheet, and a sealed explanation that would remain hidden until the right moment. Don't look away now, because Evelyn had not called them merely to reveal an old coincidence. She had called because of something your soulmate said about you 3 days earlier. During a conversation with a member of their family, your soulmate had described the sentence they most needed you to understand: "They recognize my heart even when I fail to explain it." Evelyn heard about that conversation through the family member who had been helping organize the grandmother's belongings. The phrase matched your anonymous card almost perfectly. That was when she opened the archive, found the registration sheet bearing your name, compared it with the photograph, and realized the person from the gathering was the same person your soulmate was now afraid of losing. This afternoon was urgent because the archive was scheduled to be moved away the following morning. If Evelyn had waited one more day, the envelope and photograph could have remained stored for years. Instead, she sent the message and placed the truth directly before your soulmate. Yet there was another reason for the urgency, one your soulmate initially refused to admit. Earlier that morning, they had nearly made a decision based on fear. They had drafted a message to you that sounded calm on the surface but was actually an attempt to retreat. They had convinced themselves that distance would protect both of you from uncertainty. They believed their silence was mature, even though the deeper truth was that they were frightened by how much you mattered. Before sending that message, they placed their phone aside and promised themselves they would decide by sunset. Then Evelyn's invitation arrived. This was not a command forcing them toward you. It was a mirror asking them to see the pattern they had been avoiding. For years they had carried words written by you without knowing they were yours. Those words had taught them to believe that somebody might recognize their heart. Then you entered their life and did exactly that. But when the recognition became real, they began to retreat from the very connection they had once wished to receive. What comes next changes everything, because Evelyn looked directly at them and said, "You have spent years asking for proof that sincere connection exists. Now that it stands before you, why are you treating it like something you must escape?" Your soulmate had no easy answer. They looked down at the photograph and finally admitted what they had hidden from everyone: they were not uncertain about you. They were uncertain about themselves. They feared that you would eventually see every unfinished part of them and decide that loving them required too much patience. They worried that their delays had already damaged something precious. They wondered whether your heart had grown tired while waiting for their actions to match their feelings. They were not trying to replace you. They were trying to outrun the possibility that they might disappoint you. The meeting this afternoon placed that fear in the light. Evelyn listened without interrupting and then slid the silver key across the table. "Your grandmother expected that answer," she said. Beneath the table was a small wooden box carved with the same compass symbol. Your soulmate inserted the key, but before turning it, they noticed 4 words engraved along the edge: "Truth opens what fear closes." The symbolism was impossible for them to ignore. The compass represented direction, the key represented honesty, the white flower represented a memory that had remained gentle even after years of silence, and the stopped clock represented a moment waiting to be understood. None of these symbols promised that every challenge would vanish. They asked for courage, responsibility, and clear speech. Your soulmate turned the key. Inside the box were 3 objects: the original sheet containing your handwritten message, a folded letter from their grandmother, and a second sealed envelope in your soulmate's own handwriting. The sight of that handwriting startled them most. They had written the envelope many years ago and forgotten it existed. Evelyn reminded them of an exercise their grandmother once gave them after they received the anonymous card. She had asked them to write a letter to the unknown person who might one day understand their heart. Your soulmate had felt embarrassed, but they wrote it anyway. They described the person they hoped to meet. Someone emotionally perceptive, someone who noticed quiet changes, someone who remained compassionate without losing self-respect, someone whose presence made honesty feel possible, and someone whose eyes seemed to ask questions deeper than ordinary conversation. Your soulmate had sealed that letter and given it to their grandmother, believing it would never be opened. Now it rested before them, and every quality they had described led back to you. Don't skip. The next revelation was even more personal. Their grandmother's folded letter contained instructions written for the day the anonymous writer and your soulmate became known to one another. She explained that she had watched 2 brief moments at the gathering. First, she saw you give your seat to a tired visitor even though nobody was watching. Later, she saw your soulmate help a child repair a torn paper star. You and your soulmate never spoke, but you both performed quiet acts of care within minutes of each other. She took the photograph because the 2 of you appeared in the same frame, each unaware of the other, each offering kindness without expecting recognition. To her, the image represented 2 lives sharing the same value before sharing the same conversation. She did not claim to know what the future would become. She simply preserved the moment because it reminded her that genuine connections often begin through character long before they begin through words. When your soulmate read this, their eyes filled with emotion. The discovery did not feel like a fantasy designed to remove choice. It made choice more important. You had crossed their path once without knowing it. You had entered their life again with greater meaning. Now they had to decide whether fear would cause them to overlook you a second time. This is where the story begins, Evelyn told them, repeating the words written at the top of the grandmother's letter. Not where it ends. A sign can bring someone to a doorway, but only honesty can open it. Your soulmate understood. They could no longer use mystery as an excuse for inaction. They needed to explain the silence, the confusion, the afternoon meeting, and the truth of what they had been feeling. They needed to tell you that the distance you sensed was not emptiness. It was emotion they did not know how to carry. They needed to admit that their calm appearance had concealed a private struggle between love and self-doubt. They needed to tell you that the person sitting across from them this afternoon was not someone they were choosing over you. Evelyn had brought them there to show that your presence in their story reached farther back than either of you realized.